Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Good to see everyone. Instagram tells everyone that we're now live. Hello, Poonam. Good to see you. Hi. Good to see everyone here. Me and Ash are actually just gonna dance. This is what we're gonna do on our live. I always don't know what to do with myself in this first couple of minutes, so I will introduce myself. That's probably a good idea. My name is Anna. I'm one of the co-creators here on Savouring the Indo-Caribbean, and today we'll be speaking with Ashley, who is also the founder of the Brown Gyal Diary. I am so excited to be in conversation with her, and I'm just gonna let this play for a second, then I'm gonna turn it off. Yes, so we'll be in conversation with Ashley of Brown Gyal Diary, and we're going to be talking about Indo-Caribbean identity and cultural preservation. It's a series that we've been doing here on Savoring for a little bit now, and I'm always blown away by the depth of conversations that we go into and how different everyone's lived experience is. So we're going to hear a little bit from Ashley. I'm going to invite her onto the live now after I figure this out. Yeah, I'm going to grab Ashley onto the live, and we'll just start off by giving a little bit of background on Ashley. I'll read a little bit of a bio, and then we're going to be talking and going a little deeper into this amazing book, Two Times Removed, which is a curation of 16 fiction stories written by 16 Indo-Caribbean women exploring various topics related to Indo-Caribbean culture and identity. If you haven't picked that up yet, that's one of my favorite books. It's one of the first times we, as Indo-Caribbean women, seen ourselves in fiction and seen ourselves in literature. So we're going to be going a little bit deeper into the story that I wrote called Karila, and I will invite Ashley onto the live, and I will grab her now, and I'll go through and explain a little bit more about Karila. So let's see if hopefully when you press the button, you just hope Instagram does what it's supposed to do. There we are.
Oh my gosh, it's cutting off half my head. Okay, it's okay. I have a really big forehead, so that's probably
Actually,
why.
you do not have a really big forehead. Let me lift this up. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's so good to see you.
You have like a really nice like speaking voice. Like you sound like those people that are like on TV, like on like the breakfast morning shows. Like, you should think about
Oh, well, Ashley, anytime I need a confidence boost, I'm just going to invite you onto a live.
No,
Well, thank you so much. It's so good to see you. You look fantastic. And I've been a great admirer of yours and what you've done with Brown Gyal Diary. So I'm honored to share space with you today.
Thank you. I'm honored to share space with you too. I think what you're doing is amazing. And I love like the past year, like all of these different like Indo-Caribbean people are just coming together. I feel like through the pandemic, like it really, enhanced our community, which is nice. So I'm like happy to see all of us like doing our thing and like looking into different streams, whether it's food, music, literature, whatever. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too, it's great like with platforms like Brown Gyal Diary, where it was one of the first platforms I saw representation of Indo-Caribbean women, and of course the 2021 Indo-Caribbean Women's Summit. I'll just plug that in right now too as well. Is a space that is so really empowering for us, and so kudos to you and the women before us who have created space for us, who have created workshops and just resources. So we're in gratitude. And with Savoring the Indo-Caribbean, I didn't know where it was going to go. I just knew that I wanted to create a space for food, basically, but it's kind of grown into what it is today, which is nice. So before we begin, Ash, I'm going to read a bio of yours. And when I was reading this, I was blown away. And it was like, it's so great to see, and this is why I wanted to have you on here, is because it's really great to see ourselves represented in a bio like this. So I'm just going to read it. So Ashley Abdul is all three titles: mother, founder, and communications and marketing expert. Ashley is the founder of an international organization, the Brown Gyal Diary. They focus on cultivating, creating, and collaborating within the Indo-Caribbean community to create representation and preserve cultural identity. Bringing on a team of 6 women during a pandemic, her team was able to grow their platform by over 600% and over 11,000 supporters digitally worldwide. That's amazing, Ashley. Ashley was featured on Breakfast Television Toronto, the Mississauga local radio station, Toronto Caribbean, the Caribbean Camera, Street Voices Toronto, and Queen's New York Library South Asian Heritage Month panel. Graduating from York University with a degree in political science, she has developed a career within the nonprofit sector focused on communications, marketing, and branding. She has supported nonprofit organizations with strategies to help them grow and develop their storytelling through their digital platforms. You did a fantastic job with Brown Gyal Diary, by the way, in that area. Her latest endeavor includes exploring the impacts of ethnic cultural differences within our professional experiences. She's currently working on a blog series to highlight this work, launching in late 2021. Providing a millennial approach to the nonprofit world and growing social impact is her passion, and she plans on passing down the torch whenever and however she can.
I should probably bit. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I gave her like a lot to read, but next time I will shorten it.
No, but it wouldn't do you justice then. So in addition to anything that I read, is there anything else you want to tell us about yourself?
No, like I think that's everything. I think I just kind of, with Brown Girl Diary, I mean, specifically focusing on that, I think like within the last year, my team and I, we've really been able to take it to a different level, and it's really grown in ways that we actually didn't plan on it growing. And just like you were saying about savoring the Indo-Caribbean, it's just kind of like going with the motions and going with the flow and seeing what works for the community and learning on the go. And that's kind of like what I do a lot. And I find like within communications, marketing, and the nonprofit world, that's like a big part of my job. And I've learned to just kind of like pivot a lot and adjust and learn, and right now I'm looking into cultural diversity a lot. It's something I'm really interested in, and like how are we exploring that within communications. So yeah, that's kind of me. But yeah, I'm also a mom, and that's like my favorite thing in the world. Obviously my son's 3, and yeah, that's me. That's what I do. That's who I am. So
that's amazing to wear all those hats. And you know what's amazing is that you bring all of these hats when you meet a moment, right? When you're integrating what you're doing as a mom into Brown Gyal Diary and vice versa, I'm sure. So that's what makes it really beautiful.
Exactly.
So before we get into conversation, it's going to be a 2-parter. First, we're going to be talking about identity, and then we're going to be talking about cultural preservation. And I really admire the work that Brown Gyal Diary is doing on this front. So I'm honored to have conversation with you and for you to tell us a little bit more about that. Before I get into it, I just want to share the symbolism behind Karila so that everyone understands where we're coming from and how we started these conversations in the first place. So in Two Times Removed, the story Karila is based on a teenage Indo-Caribbean teenager, and it spans 3 generations. So you get to see the generation before her, and the main plot is her and being a teenager and navigating being Indo-Caribbean as a teenager. And then it goes into the 3rd generation and her daughter. And so in this in the latter part, there's a beautiful moment where her daughter receives a gift, which is a collection of recipes, of Indo-Caribbean recipes, which of course I think is such a beautiful thing to pass down. And I think it's one of the things that for us, at least on Savoring the Indo-Caribbean, is to have these pass down these traditions. Like we're really big on passing down like food preservation and going back to some of the recipes that we used to have back in the days. And it's also symbolic. So when I was writing it, I also wanted to share sort of like how I navigated being Indo-Caribbean and my identity. And so in the recipe book, it's a symbol. It symbolizes the array of Indo-Caribbean identities and culture. And in the book, some of the recipes her daughter recognizes, and there's one she doesn't recognize. She doesn't recognize Karila. So you know from the book, reading the story, that she doesn't like Karila. And so really this was me saying like there are certain things that for me didn't resonate as part of the Indo-Caribbean identity and culture that I honestly had to put down. And it didn't resonate with me based on my value system or who I was as a person who was trying to be. And so really it was symbolic of here's this recipe book, here's the list of Indo-Caribbean, and I wish it was that simple, right? Here's the list, let's just pick and choose, right? It's obviously not that easy. But it's like, okay, I don't like certain things, I'm gonna put it down, and I'm still gonna educate, I'm still gonna, you know, acknowledge that it's there. And so that was really the symbolism behind it that I also wanted to make sure I shared. And so this is how these conversations came about. And so, with that being said, I'm wondering from you, I don't know if that story at all resonated with you, or if you wanted to tell us a little bit more about your experience being an Indo-Caribbean woman, especially as a teenager.
Yeah, and I think like being Indo-Caribbean for me was something that never really became a thing until like maybe 2 or 3 years ago when I really started to like explore this word, this term. Like I really didn't know what it was until that time, right? Like I knew I was an Indian person. I knew I was a oh, someone's asking what book before we continue.
Yeah.
Maybe book one more time just so people could see it.
So it's Two Times Removed, and it's an anthology of 16 fiction stories. And the link is in my bio as well.
Um, just quickly shout out to Tiara, who is the editor of that book. She's actually Brown Girl Diaries editor in chief and my good friend. And she also like has her own Indo-Caribbean literature platform, Bookworm Babe. So yeah, just shout her out. But yeah, so back to your question. My Karila, right? That's what you were asking me. What is
Well,
my
basically, I really want to know first, like, what was your experience? So you were saying that you didn't really, like, really feel it, I guess, is what
Yeah,
I'm hearing.
I didn't really feel it at all. Like when I was growing up, I felt like I never fit the Indo-Caribbean identity. And just kind of like how you were saying, like, you know, some things you pick up and some things you don't. I feel like a lot of time I was trying to pick things up and it wasn't working for me. And I felt like if I didn't adapt to certain things, like if I didn't like certain music, if I didn't like do the dances in high school, or if I didn't hang out with these certain people and I didn't go to certain parties, or I didn't hang out within that community, I wasn't an Indian Caribbean person. Like I wasn't valued as an Indo-Caribbean person. And it wasn't until I got older and I started to realize there was a whole other side to it, right? That historical side and that real cultural preservation side that we think about. And I think that's something that I really got to learn on my own is like, why is history important, right? Like growing up, I also hated history in school, just history in general. I hated history. Like I think like in like grade 10 history, I got like a D, and I think I dropped I sucked at it. But I just wasn't interested in it, right? Like I didn't care about what I was learning about. And it wasn't until I got older where I realized like, wow, history really has a big impact on who we are and who we become. And it really helps us understand who we are, right? Because maybe if I understood these pieces of myself while I was in my teens, I might have respected my identity as an Indo-Caribbean woman a lot more. And it wasn't until I got older that I was able to do that, where I would have conversations with elderly people, and like as we have this conversation, I keep thinking about my grandpa, like from what you were saying even from the beginning, right? Like the idea of food and like how he introduced us to food, or the conversations that we had. So for me, it wasn't until I got older that I was actually able to embrace my Indo-Caribbean identity. And in high school I struggled with it so much because in elementary school, I didn't know a lot of Indo-Caribbean people. And I'm like, oh my God, like I need to get into that group of people. Like this is who I needed to be. And I'm sure like a lot of Indo-Caribbean girls have actually gone through this, a lot of us more than others. And I think it's because we were probably all battling this like identity crisis, and none of us wanted to talk about it. And we're all just trying to like in that stage of like fitting in, right? So yeah, like not to continually repeat myself and blab on, but yeah, definitely it wasn't until I got older where I really got to embrace my Indo-Caribbean identity and like be proud of it. And I like proudly can say and defend myself as like an Indo-Caribbean woman when people ask me who I am, because I can explain it, right? And I understand the background, and I can tell people what is Indian and what is Caribbean and why do they go together, and when you're in Trinidad it's weird to say that, right? But when you come up here it's a normalcy. So well, becoming a normalcy. So yeah, that's pretty much how it was for me.
And I'm curious to know, and maybe this goes into some of these Corellas, but you were mentioning earlier that you sort of had there was sort of this idea of what Indo-Caribbean is supposed to be, and it felt like I heard you say that you didn't feel like it fit who you wanted to be. So I'm wondering what that identity looked like for you at that time.
Well, for me, like, okay, when I think back at high school, like, it's like so much cringy, even when I think about it now. I'm just kind of like, oh my God, like, why did I think about it that way, right? And it's because I didn't know much about what it meant to be Indo-Caribbean. I knew the basics, like, well, what I thought were the basics. Like, you had to like chutney music, you had to drink when you were young. You had to go to like the chutney parties. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
I know exactly what you mean,
it's
and that's why like I want you to let us like talk
like,
to me about that.
oh yeah, like it's actually like when I think about it now, it's like, oh my God, like why did I even act that way when I was in high school? Like it's really, really cringe. Like, you know what I mean? Like you had to like date a guy that like likes cars, like all these different things, right? Like it's all these different weird things that it's not weird. I mean, it's a part like because a lot of people in our community are like that, or like like at lunchtime, like we're all going to like Drew teaser or something because that's just like like it's just a thing we do. I don't know. It's just it was fun. It was fun, but like I said, like it was also me like trying to feel like I had to adapt and like do certain things if that wasn't who I was. But I felt like if I didn't do it, then I wasn't valued in the Indo-Caribbean community, or I wasn't um like respected. And for me, a lot of it was like my physical appearance, right? Like I was always taller, I was always darker, like I was always more outspoken, like I was always like I wasn't like doing the standard route. Like I never wanted to just like go to school and be a doctor. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's obviously like certain cliches attached to that in our community. It's just not something that was like for me, right? Like even like going into nonprofit, people are like, what is that? Like that's not a thing that you do, right? Until you can actually sit down with your family members and explain to them and kind of open them up to this new world. But for me, it was just like everything for me was just like working backwards for me. Like I was trying to do things and it wasn't who I was. And I'm just like, all right, like, maybe I'm not an Indo-Caribbean person. Like maybe I'm just Caribbean. Like I'm just gonna abandon that Indian side. Like I'm never gonna listen to chutney again. I'm never gonna do this. I'm never gonna do that. But that's not how life works, obviously. Like I'm not a life expert. Like I'm still pretty consider myself obviously pretty young. But from what I've learned from that time to this time, like it was a big shift in mindset of like what it means to be Indo-Caribbean. And it's a lot more fun now because you actually like appreciate it way more. And it's not just like I told you, like those standard cliches of like listening to Chinese music like all the time until you're like hypnotized. But
I know, and that's one of the things for me. I think is a big deal for us to talk about is because I think are these stereotypes and is this image of what Indo-Caribbean needs to be, and really, unfortunately, what I understand to be true is that if we have a sense of what being Indo-Caribbean needs to be, if we don't fit that psychologically, sometimes we end up rejecting it altogether, right? And so
exactly.
here we are like trying to figure out, okay, well, like you said, we're not Indo-Caribbean, I'm not Trini enough, I'm not Guyanese enough, so like what the F, right? What am I to do here? And so I think a lot of it, of course, is in our family units and in our culture. And I think one of the things is important for us to do here on Savoring is show representation of all the different ways Indo-Caribbean people can show up, right?
Exactly.
And so it's very important for us to see other people doing different things because that's how we form a sense of identity, right? So these conversations around, oh, you have to like chutney music, you have to date this type of guy, your hair has to be this way, right? And
Yeah.
so you end up like, then what am I then? Who am I supposed to be? And so it's only with age.
And then you feel like you have to be like you have to fit that, or you have to be like drastically different and like abandon it. Like there was a lot of women when I first started Brown Girl Diary because like like you said, you become like defensive for your identity right at a certain point, especially within the Indo-Caribbean community, because there is a lot of like like when you're young, there's a lot of like cattiness, there's a lot of jealousy, there's a lot of judging, and that just comes with again like our intergenerational traumas and our upbringing of like being very like competitive with each other and not working together, right? So for me, like it was a lot of like there was a lot of women who came to me when I first started Brown Girl Diary and were like, why are you doing this? Like I don't even want to be like they just would message us and be like, we don't want to be a part of this community. And I would like message girls and I would be like, well, like the ones who messaged us obviously, and I would be like, listen, like I understand where you're coming from, and that's exactly like what we want to like abandon. We want to let you know that this is like an open space. Like you don't have to look a certain way or act a certain way or feel a certain way. Like Indo-Caribbeanness comes in like lots of different forms, and we want to show people that we need to like define it ourselves. Like for me, I just feel like in Indo-Caribbean, like the Indo-Caribbean identity is only now truly like being defined on the forefront, right? Like we know and I think even we're like still discovering who we are right now. We're still learning who we are, right? Like we are literally, and I was saying this to somebody a couple days ago, like we're actually like creating the history now. The history is still being created now. Like 100 years from now, like people are gonna look back at us and be like, this is how the Indo-Caribbean identity was formed. And they're gonna be like, there were these lives and there were these conversations and these were these events, right? And people will not have to question that. They're gonna have the resources. So um yeah, I just think that there was a lot of people who were kind of like defensive at first, and we tried our best to like let people know like, no, we understand we don't want to fit in a box, and this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to dismantle that box. So
And this is why I love the work that Brown Gal Diary is doing, because it's such important work. It's also very difficult, right? You do have to have those conversations. You need to be brave enough to have very, very difficult conversations with people around all sorts of things, right? And so for me personally, it's like, you know, if we can realize that identity is very fluid and it's not a box, and we can show up and we can actually claim it. Like if we go through this process of claiming that identity, guess what? That's what it becomes, right?
exactly.
So when we are becoming doctors and lawyers and artists and this and that, and we're saying, I'm an artist, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm this and that, and I'm Indo-Caribbean, guess what identity starts to look like, right?
Exactly. We really have to like take advantage of that and like really form it, just like you were saying. And another thing that I wanted to add is that one thing that I realized, like when I was having conversation with these women, is like I could tell them like what we hope that this space will be, but like at the beginning we really had to like convince a lot of people, you know, and a lot of people were like, no, like I don't want to listen to you. And we have to remember like identity is such a sensitive part of, it's literally who we are, right? Like
Yeah.
identity is such a big piece of who we become as women, and how it makes us women, and it's and men as well, right? So it's just kind of like we have to let all people who are not ready to jump into the Indo-Caribbean community, because they've had such harsh and painful experiences, we have to like create those safe spaces for them, and let them kind of like jump into it when they're ready, because they're also going through like a lot of healing. And we see that with a lot of women, right? Like imagine being like 25 years old and you've never talked about your mental health, and you were depressed for like 5 years of your life. Like when I held one of my first Brown Girl Diary events, like I remember my grandma, she like came to me and she was talking to me. She's like, no, this is like, I'm very proud of you, because this is the first time like I actually got to speak, right? She's like an old Indo-Caribbean wife. Like she doesn't speak much. Like, you know, people don't listen to her. You know how it goes. She keeps her thoughts to herself. She keeps her past to herself. And like within that space, she was like, we really got to open up with each other. So yeah, there's a lot of women dealing with a lot of things.
Yeah, and it's great to see that some women are going on that journey, and I think it's just important really to have the message to say there is a process of claiming it sometimes, especially if you are different. And so that's a whole thing, and that's for a different conversation. But it's, you know, just know that if anyone's watching, just know that you're not alone in this process of being confused and not liking chutney music and preferring reggae or whatever the case may be, because truth be told, you can love and like whatever you want and still be Indo-Caribbean. So that's my opinion. How about you?
I agree. Put a thumbs up if you agree, guys.
So before we get into, I'm just going to read some comments. So some Indo-Caribbean people from the Caribbean prefer only to identify as Caribbean. Have you seen the Indo-Caribbean identity more prevalent with the Indo-Caribbean diaspora in Canada or US? Have you seen the Indo-Caribbean identity more prevalent? I have recently. I don't know about you, Ash.
Some Indo-Caribbean people say the Caribbean prefer to only be identified as Caribbean.
Yeah, I think basically what they're saying is people usually only say like they're Caribbean
Oh,
instead of saying Indo-Caribbean.
yeah, but have you seen the Indo-Caribbean identity more prevalent in the Indo-Caribbean diaspora in Canada and the US? Yeah, so I guess we were talking about this a bit actually in another live, but yeah, I think Indo-Caribbean really, it does kind of, it's more attached to like people in the US and Canada, because we're a part of like that double diaspora, right? Whereas people in the Caribbean, like their ancestors just came from India or wherever, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, wherever these people came from, it was just that one, literally like that one trip, right? Whereas we're going from there to Canada, which is why I think like Indo-Caribbean is something that's more like, you know, westernized and used in Canada and the US.
Yeah, and I think when I can't speak for anyone living in Guyana or Trinidad, but I understand that if they are to say it, they would basically like say Indo-Guyanese or Indo-Trinidadian as opposed to like the broader Indo-Caribbean.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, so we kind of sort of talked about it, but like what's popping out to you in terms of this, going back to the symbolism of Karila, like me having to sort of like drop certain things and being like, okay, you know what? That's not for me. I'm just gonna have to put that down for a sec, or this isn't resonating with me personally, like going back to that idea of Karila. Is there anything for you that stands out? I know we talked a little bit about it, but like what would be some of your Karilas?
You know what's funny, like when you say that, is like when I was reading your story, like I read it again, obviously, like before we had our live, just to refresh my memory. But like when I thought of like Karila, I thought of it as like obviously like cultural preservation, but I actually didn't think of it as anything negative. I thought of it as something like a little bit more positive, of something that's like, what is something that attaches us to our culture, not something that like shuns us away. So like when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about it in that way. So it's just like kind of interesting, like how people can read your story and like interpret it totally different than you.
That's
But
really cool, yeah.
but when I think about something that I've like actually kind of like put away, um, like it's kind of hard to say. Like what would I say? Something that I've put away that's kind of shunned away from it. I would just say like I wouldn't say like it's actually something. I would say like it's that like I feel like in the Indo-Caribbean community, and I'm trying to like, I don't want to say it in a bad way, of course, and I don't want it to come off in a bad way, but I feel like there's these like two communities now. There's like the one that's where people are like trying to be educated and they're just trying to be this and they're trying to be that, and like, you know, like our communities where we're like working to explore the Indo-Caribbean identity in a whole other front that we've never done before. But then there's still this community that's not ready to do that, right? And we're ready to kind of like continue this intergenerational trauma where we're like, you know, the women act a certain way and the men act a certain way. So for me, I feel like it's like abandoning that idea of what Kuli is and like switching to Indo-Caribbean. So like shifting that term. Like for me, I always used to use the word Kuli. And now I don't use it as much. So I think like really like abandoning that word for me was really important because to me it's attached to a different identity that I'm kind of like, that's like that high school identity for me. Whereas now I'm kind of moving into like identifying myself as an Indo-Caribbean person. Does that make sense? I
Yeah,
hope.
that makes a lot of sense. And you know what? It's really interesting because I sort of went through this process of sort of being really delicate about how I use the word, just because I know it's really a sensitive word, just generally speaking. But you're right in terms of saying like there are things that I'll have conversations with people, and like there are certain behaviors that are really attached to being Kuli, like the drinking and the partying, and they're just, oh no, I don't know if we lost Ash. Oh, I think we might have lost Ash, but I think I might have been able to find her again. Oh, there we are.
Heard you. I heard what you were saying. I don't know what happened. I went to like move the text at the bottom and it just like swiped away. This is so bad. I haven't done a live in a long time. Sorry guys, but I was here. Go ahead and summarize it a bit if you want to.
Yeah, so just to wrap it up, it was like there are still these conversations of what being Kuli is versus, and if it's easier for people to sort of disseminate all of these different behaviors around being Kuli versus being Indo-Caribbean. I think it's really smart of you to sort of transition into the labels, because I think there's a heavy weight to the word Kuli for many reasons. And there's sometimes still conversations that I have where someone's like, oh, that's too cool, that's Kuli. Like that is like the drinking and the partying and the this and the that.
Drinking. It's just for me, like I don't want to only be attached to that. And I feel like when I hear that word, that's what I think of. And it's like because of like my experiences when I was younger, whereas like you were saying, like now you're transitioning. But some people interpret the word much different, but for me, that's what it is for me.
Yeah, and I just want to say, if anybody's watching, it's we can also like redefine what coolie means, right? We don't
Yeah.
need to shift over to the word. So if anyone, we're not trying to say like to abandon the word if that's not what you personally want to do. It is an option to switch over to being Indo-Caribbean and changing the way that you interpret being coolie. There is a heavy weight, and so that just know there's another option for you. Because I have conversation, it's like, oh, like, you know, these coolie people. Like that's
And you're like, should I be offended? Like, should I not? Like, now that when you're like doing so much research around it, you're like, you're just like, okay, this is like awkward. You get into like an awkward place of like, should I say something? Should I not? Like, should I drop some like educational bombs on these people right now, or is that too much? You know? But yeah, I hear you.
yeah. Yeah. And so, and some people are commenting about, you know, the partying and stuff. And so a lot of us who are being educated around what it means to be Indo-Caribbean, we understand how the identity has been formed, and the ways in which alcohol was used as an oppressive tool by the British. We completely agree. We understand, and we get it. And so one of the things that you were saying, Ash, is like, part of becoming a little bit more educated is you actually start to realize it. And I said it in one of my lives with Vinay the other day, which was like, if I was an Indo-Caribbean person and I knew how alcohol was used as a tool for oppression, I would now be like, nah, bro.
Yeah.
Like, bad alcohol. Because I'm like so like anti like colonialism. I'm not about it. So I don't care how good alcohol makes me feel. Don't want it.
I'm just reading some of the comments. I like there was so many other comments and now they're all gone for me, which is sad. But I'll read this one here. Redefining would be great, but as Ashley said, there's some division on embracing coolie behaviors or understanding historical trauma. Yeah, and like I think, and you know, like one thing that I love about the Indo-Caribbean community is that like people are willing to hear, like now even the elderly, right? Like they're willing to listen to what we have to say. They're willing to learn about how their history impacted them. They're willing to, you know, some of the elderly are like willing to shift their way of thinking, but also like younger people are also willing to like see those like posts that we put, the infographic posts that you post, that we post, and learn about our history, or even Vinay posts, right? Like some of the music, like when he posts those lyrics, like that's some of my favorite stuff where we really get to embrace the best parts of our culture. So yeah, I think people are willing to learn, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too you were mentioning, maybe there's this dissection of people who are still sort of in that area of, you know, being with the stereotypes and the, you know, kind of conforming to what they feel they need to be like. And one of the things is like we obviously have to meet people where they are. And for everyone who's maybe watching this, or you know someone, I think one of the best things that I could have ever done for myself in terms of growing myself as a human being, like let's forget identities for a sec, just who we are as people, is to manage our own self and all of the things
Yeah,
that, you know, our suffering and our pain, because ultimately what we're trying to do is be better people, right? And then
exactly.
to layer that on to being Indo-Caribbean is a blessing, right? Like we get to have that label or that identity, and so, and all the beautiful things that come with it. So you were mentioning that in reading Karela, you interpreted Karela as being like, you know, the amazing thing. So I was going to ask you that anyways, and tell me a little bit more about what you love about being Indo-Caribbean, and then we'll go into cultural preservation.
Yeah, for sure. What do I love about being Indo-Caribbean? Like I just,
Or what are you passing down? Like, you know, because you're a mom,
yeah,
right? Like your mom, I'm guessing you're thinking about this stuff.
of course. Yeah. Okay. So I remember this one time, right? I was like bathing my son. I was bathing my son.
Baby, yeah.
I was bathing my son, and we were just like singing or whatever, and like I started like singing him this like Sundar Popo song, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like it was really funny though. But in my head I was just like, oh, like you know, like you're always saying like, oh, you know, like you need to know these songs, like people always tell you like you know you should know this music, whatever. And I just remember singing him that song, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like you know, I really need to show him these songs, because do you think he's gonna pass them to like his family? And sorry, like I like my grandpa is really sick right now, and I just like a lot lately I've been listening to a lot of like Indian music. Anytime I get in the car, I just want to listen to Indian music. And this is one song my grandma and my mom were showing me that his mom used to play for him. It's
Mm.
a known song, but like I don't remember the name of it, but I can like post it on our story later. But it's just the idea of like music, like passing down music is a big thing in my family. Like a lot of my uncles like play music, a lot of them are DJs. And I've just always been absorbed in that. And I realized like when my grandpa got sick and was still sick, um, that like that's one thing that helped me felt connected to him, you know, and just made me like think about him. Or when I thought about like the good times of when like think about like when we were young and he was healthy, just like the music, like it just brought us back to like the family, well, like, you know, the family parties, like those were things that we knew growing up as Indian people. Like, you know, like on the weekend, whatever, you go to school, in the week you go to school, and then on the weekends you go out with your grandparents, and they're playing this music and they're playing cards or whatever they're doing, right? So for me, like I think it's definitely the music is something that I want to pass down to my child, but obviously like just him knowing like what it means to be an Indo-Caribbean person, and he continues to like share that. And I think that music speaks so much. Like it's something we see so much in our community, right? It's the only thing that we were even really like able to feel I mean, besides the food, of course, but it's one of the biggest things that we bring from like South Asia, and we bring from the diaspora, and we bring from the indentureship is the music. So for me, like that's probably the biggest thing.
And I love that you mentioned that, because now that, especially with the Cutlass on that platform, you feel incredibly rooted when you're reading those posts and
Yeah.
you're actually knowing what they're saying.
And you're like,
I'm like,
what they were saying, like now it makes sense. Like that's
I know. I also did say to Vinay, like, I'm glad that he's letting me know what these, well, all of us know, not me personally, but all of us know what these songs are traditionally used for too, because now we can even take a next step and say like, oh, this song is for this occasion, because I understand that to be true, where
exactly. Even like,
you're
okay, like, you know, like when you're young, you're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be my wedding song, and it's really like a song about like somebody dying, and then now you're like, oh shoot, like I don't. It's pretty though. I'll play it,
It's good though.
but yeah,
Okay, so I'm glad that you shared music, because I think that is just, and I think that's one, and bringing it back to some of our conversations around kind of this dissection of like our identities. I think it's one thing all Indo-Caribbean can agree on is music. Like our music is fantastic. The way that we use music, and I don't know about you, but like I remember waking up. I used to like cringe, but my mom used to play loud music at like 9 o'clock in the morning, playing roti, like while making roti, and it used to drive me crazy, right? Because
oh
of course I'm like partying Friday nights, so then
yeah, it is.
but now I mean I would die for that, right? Like that's all I want, is to have chutney music in the morning at 9 a.m. So last but not least, Ash, I wanted to let everyone know about all the work that you're doing with Brown Gyal Diary, and one of the big aspects of what Brown Gyal Diary wants to do is around cultural preservation, right? And I understand that you have a few projects on the go, and so I wanted to know a little bit more about them, because I think it's important for everyone watching to understand the significance of these projects and how we ourselves can support these projects, right? We may not have the wherewithal to kind of do these things, and so there's organizations here that are really supportive of preserving our identity. So whatever you can do to support them, please always consider it. So with that being said, let us know a little bit more about what's going on with Brown Gyal Diary.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much of like a tongue twister that was for people, but like, I'm like, shoot, like it's even hard for me to say. I just say BGD now because it's a little bit easier. But no, I hear you. So yeah, the Preserving Culture campaign is exactly what it sounds like. We want to preserve our culture. We want to make sure that we have these stories kept somewhere safe, and we want to make sure that we're building our community in many different ways. So what we did is we launched a fundraiser. So it was supposed to last a month, and then we decided to extended for the entire year and host like mini events throughout the year to help raise funds for our campaign. And the reason okay, so there's four elements I would say to this project. Sometimes I like need to paint this picture for myself because it's so many different things. And there are three elements. So there's like programming, there's like an online digital membership, and then there's like this research element where we really want to create formal research for the Indo-Caribbean community. So that includes like an archive, that includes like like kind of like a database of like all of these different articles and information and news and images and this and that. And we wanted to just create a space where people don't have to like look and find, right? Where it's just like they can go to one space and they can have access to all these different things, whether it's research, whether it's like projects that you're creating or projects that other organizations are creating. We wanted to create this like Indo-Caribbean hub where people can find everything else. So it's not like they're lost in the dust. And that's why it was really important for us to like do international work. That's why the membership, an online membership where we can connect Indo-Caribbean women across the world. There's like women who have messages from Australia, obviously the Caribbean, obviously the UK, all over the place. And we're like, there's little bursts of us everywhere, and we want to make sure that everybody can have access to this and everybody sees themselves and everybody is relevant in one space, right? And then through this we have all these like organizations that are coming out of like Canada now, which is amazing. And then we have a bunch in New York. We have a few in Florida. Now we want to extend to the UK so people can find the confidence to kind of do that themselves, right? Like start their own platforms themselves over there. So they're talking about UK Indo-Caribbean stuff. I say that because we have like a big Indo-Caribbean base in the US in the UK now. Not a base, but you know, like
Yeah,
through
yeah.
connect with them often, not like this huge like cool physical space, but you know what I mean. So yeah, basically what we want to do with the Preserving Culture campaign, you can learn all about it on our website, is just build this community and have resources and have information and have a safe space on the internet where we can all come and get together and learn about our history, learn about our culture, learn about our future, see women that look like us, learn from women that look like us who have had similar experiences, who have had similar I guess, past and whatnot, and just be able to embrace that together. So that's a little bit about the campaign. But like I said, you can learn all about it on our website, www.browngirldiary.com. But if you type in Brown Girl Diary, it'll come up as well. And obviously the link is in our bio. So definitely check it out. We have like some events coming up in the next couple months, which I'm really excited about. So we'll share it with you, Anna, so you can share it on your page as well.
Yes, please do. I think if we don't already, we have the link to the Preserving Culture campaign, the GoFundMe. We have that in our bio. We'd love to have whatever links that you want to provide us in the bio as well to give people more information about what the projects actually are. Because I don't know if anybody was just listening to the extent and the scope of this project, but imagine a hub where all Indo-Caribbean people can get access, personalized access to being Indo-Caribbean, what it could mean in terms of like creating a thriving community. And I know you're big on personal growth and all that. So imagine having a space that you can actually go to and get this information in one spot. So
Exactly.
I honor you guys and all the work that you're doing, because this is no easy job. And I'm so glad that you dreamt up this dream. I don't know, like, I don't know how you dreamt it up, but that's for a different conversation. And I'm so glad that, you know, today there are these spaces co-created for all of us. And the one last thing that I wanted to ask you before you leave us is, if there's anybody here, what would you say to anyone who may be struggling with identity, struggling with cultural preservation, just struggling right now being Indo-Caribbean and what that means? What would you tell them?
Learn about it, like learn about why you're struggling with it. Like there's probably a reason, right? Like there's probably something that happened to you that deterred you from it. Learn about it, like step back, take a look at your history, because you have no idea how important your history is to who you are today. I really, really never realized until I started to explore the term Indo-Caribbean, because you will feel so connected to yourself once you learn these things, and you'll be so proud of who you are, and you'll be so proud of the culture, the vibrancy, and everything that comes with being an Indo-Caribbean person. So just educate yourself, you know, follow all these different platforms. If you don't want to pick up a book and read, follow the platforms, like every single one, Savoring the Indo-Caribbean, Jahaji Sisters, Lotus, all these groups, Brown Gale Diary, of course. We make the information so easy to absorb because we want to like allow people to embrace it in ways that they understand, right? Like not everybody wants to pick up a textbook and read. Not everybody wants to, you know, do the research themselves. Like we're trying to make it as easy as possible because it's a real thing, right? And it is a big part of who we are, and we really want people to be able to understand it. So I would just say educate yourself and understand like how your um culture is a part of your identity.
And I think just tacking onto that, I think one of the things that helped me is like understanding some of the things that I struggled with and how that was sort of like a kind of like a underlying cultural thing that was passed down for me. So I extend that offering to anyone who's watching is like some of our suffering is really attached to our Indo-Caribbean identity. So to explore that is a really beautiful thing through education.
Exactly. Just like put your notifications on for all of our posts, Savoring, Brown Girl Diary, like I said, all the other organizations that are out there, and just like be involved in the community because you'll grow. You really will grow because I feel like I've grown being able to see a lot of women and learn from a lot of women who are experiencing the same things.
Yes, and just to close it off, Nat says, thank you both for leading these amazing platforms for our community. Appreciate it. And we appreciate all of you for joining and to listen. A part of it is we can share it, but who's consuming it, right? And who's taking it in and what you do with it is all for you, right? So we're happy to do our part and for you to show up as well. And so with that being said, Ash, I honor you.
Thank you. I honor you too. You're amazing. This was really fun. I haven't done a live in a long time. I really like this a lot. It gave me a lot of like motivation and energy. I love that.
Yes. So anytime, you're welcome anytime on here. So don't feel no ways. Like we can talk about anything, okay? So
Perfect.
with that being said, you did mention that your grandpa is ill. So we send our love and gratitude and we send our love to you and your family during this time, okay?
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Well, take good care.
Bye
Thank
everyone.
you, everyone.
Care. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.